Hey, what's going on, people? I decided to make a quick video. I know it's been a while, so I decided to make a quick video in regards to a topic that I had discussed a while back that got some feedback, some positive and some negative. And the topic I discussed at the time was racism and avoiding discussing racism with white people. And some people were like very upset at the way I worded uh, my opinion, I guess. So I decided to make a quick video to clarify what that video stood for, and again to explain why I think it's a better idea to avoid discussions of race with white folks. And when the first thing you have to think about when discussing race is that people tend to be affected by cognitive bias and cognitive dissonance when discussing matters of race and racism or racial differences. What I mean by that is someone that's, for instance, white will have a very different perspective from someone who is black or Mexican or Hispanic or Indian or whatever. Everyone has a different perspective when it comes to that issue. You know, white people don't have to deal with the same reality that we do when it comes to racism. So even if they have good intentions, their knowledge and their experiences can only really go so far when dealing with issues like that. And as humans, we're all affected by a certain level of cognitive bias. You know, we are not really designed to view our group or our race in a particularly negative light. Everyone has a certain level of subconscious bias towards his or her own group, and this is not just about race. This goes in regards to religion. It goes This goes in regards to gender, and as well as many other things, really. So you have to remember that when discussing race with someone of a different race. And I think as black people, as a minority group, we really have to think about finding dialogues that are constructive. And by constructive, I mean if you're going to discuss race with somebody or debate race issues with someone, make sure that at the end of the debate there's going to be something constructive out of it. Otherwise, it's a waste of time and you're going to be aggravated. So I feel that it's important to find something to find the ground that will help you grow as an individual and as a group. And I don't believe that discussing race with white people in today's geopolitical landscape is that effective towards that goal. Nothing constructive comes out of it because, first of all, a large number of white people that will discuss race with you will use the same old, regurgitated talking points and cliches like, oh, black people don't want to work hard, they're making excuses, don't want to take responsibilities, or African Americans commit the most crime, or other stuff. And basically, all it is they cherry pick the points that reinforce whatever they already believe, which is a form of confirmation bias, and they disregard anything that doesn't reinforce their belief system. And basically every single time you discuss with them, you'll be dealing with red herrings and irrelevant conclusions. So he will end up aggravated, and you will end up aggravated because there's no common ground being reached. And a lot of black people, while their intentions are good when discussing race, they don't do their homework as far as knowing the numbers, knowing the facts, so that when you're dealing with someone who uses these tactics, which are nothing more than derailing tactics, you can use facts and logic to prove to them that what they believe is not necessarily correct. So when discussing race with people of other groups, you have to remember that. And no matter how good your points are, no matter how logical you are, no matter how intelligent and well informed you are, a person's bias will always be uh, more important than whatever logic you come with. So if an individual already has a belief system that he or she adheres to very strongly, there's not much you can say to change their minds unless they experience it for themselves. So if you can't really do much to change their minds, even though you bring the best points, there's no advantage to sitting there talking with them. It's not constructive for us, and it doesn't really do much for them. All it does is give them another reason to reinforce their belief system and leave things as they are. So that's the advice I have for black people: is due to all these things that I mentioned, there's no point trying to sit there and convincing them of anything. And remember that even if you convince them that things are different, even if you show them that a lot of the things that black people talk about still go on and are very, very significant, there's no guarantee that the status quo will change. Nothing will be done to improve the situation. Because at the end of the day, we don't have that power. They do. And we're just kind of trying to make ends meet with what we have. So there's no point trying to get into debates with them when discussing these issues. And I mean, I could make a video that breaks down all of the same old, irrelevant conclusions and red herrings that they use, but it's not constructive. So yeah, that's really what the point of my previous video was. You have to remember that there is a high level of cognitive dissonance and cognitive bias when discussing these issues, and they're not really willing to look at all the facts, to go out there and collect the data, and they're not really willing to look at themselves in a light that is not positive. So as long as they're not willing to do that, there will be no point trying to get them to see anything other than what they want to see. So there's no point trying to debate with them. For instance, they will tell you that black people make excuses and that other groups are working hard, but what most white people don't pay attention to is that the most successful group of immigrants in America today are not Asians but Africans. African immigrants come here, they get great grades, they get good jobs. I mean, on an average, the median income of an African family living in the United States is very, very high. The level of education is very high. As a group, they're extremely successful. Every year, African families in the US send millions and millions of dollars back home. So that right there refutes the idea that black people are not hardworking or making excuses, because they're black too. And they still face a certain level of racism, even though they're not even from here. And that's a point that you could bring up. And when you talk about the crime statistics, you have to remember that, number one, the criminal justice system is extremely biased against one group. And this has been documented fairly well. And you have to also remember that crime has more to do with sociological factors. It has more to do with upbringing. It has more to do with environment. It's not really relegated to race. For instance, in the early 20th century, the crime rate in the Italian community in America was astronomical. But that's because of the environment they had to grow up in. The same goes for the Irish. But when they got absorbed into white America, everything changed. A lot of these criminals that get arrested and that commit all these crimes don't come from the best backgrounds. For instance, the crime rate among African families living in the United States is very, very low. Lower than some immigrant groups from Europe, as a matter of fact. So if you look at that, you will see that these pathologies are not necessarily tied down to a particular race, but more to sociological factors. Now, people are already biased. People are already disassociated from the reality of things, and they prefer to stick to whatever they believe in or whatever emotion drives their logic. Whereas logic should be the driving force, not emotion. So those are things you have to understand. So I think as a group in America, the best thing we can do is just try to educate one another. If you want to discuss race, do it with one another. If you want to discuss certain topics that pertain to the black community or the African diaspora as a whole, do it with one another. That would be a lot more constructive, a lot more effective towards achieving a common goal than trying to sit down with a group that has completely different set of interests from you. Because they have their own issues, they have their own priorities that they worry about, and we are not part of those priorities. We have to prioritize ourselves. But so long as we keep trying to fight for inclusion and unity, we'll keep failing, because when you ask a group of people to give you equality and recognition, you're giving them power to choose whether or not you're of equal worth to them. And as long as they have that power, there will always be inequality because they can keep saying no, or they can keep telling you whatever they want. So the only way you're going to be able to find empowerment is if you realize that you have to accept yourself and work for yourself and work for your own group. That's basically what you have to do. That's the exact same thing that happened to the Jews back in the day. For many, many years, the Zionist movement was trying to convince other Jews that they needed their own land, they needed their own community, and a physical place that they could call their own. But they didn't listen to them until Hitler came along and the Holocaust happened and millions of Jews were killed senselessly. And after that, people finally realized that there will never be any place in the world where they will be accepted unless they find a place where they're accepted by people like them, by themselves. So that's what they did. And they also have a stronger sense of community when they emigrate to other countries. You know, they go somewhere, they start their own business, they patronize their own business, they connect one another, they educate one another. So that unity gives them strength. It allows them to survive and thrive. But with black people, we just try to find assimilation. You know, we try to get them to accept us and to absorb us into their community. But we don't get anything back, really. We give them skills, we give them our skills or our knowledge, or we just decide to move in there and survive. And that's not to say that there aren't problems in the black community. There are. There are serious problems, rampant problems. But I believe those are things that have more to do with sociological factors than anything else. And I think as long as we try to get white America to come and see these factors and fix them, we will never really fix them. You know, we have to educate ourselves. We have to identify ourselves and establish our own identity outside of the white sphere of influence. Only then will we be able to get to a place that will be close to or equal to theirs. But if you're waiting for them to come and accept you and make you as part of their group, you're wasting your time because it will never happen. You know, so there's no point trying to even enforce it because you'll be stereotyped no matter how good you are. You know, you'll have labels attached to you no matter how good you are. So there's no point trying to break free of those things because they will always be there. The best thing you can do is make sure that your community is doing okay. Make sure that your people are doing okay. And the only way we can do that is by educating one another. You know, find books that will help you see these things because these things are public knowledge. It's just that people don't bother to read them. They prefer to, you know, get educated from sound bites and cliches and labels. And that's how they form their opinions of different groups. You know, and that's not to say that you should hate white people, because that's what a lot of people think. They think that anytime a black person talks about race, is automatically an angry black man or is trying to hate them. And that's not what this video or anything as such is about. It's about finding the ability to like yourself and improve yourself. And understanding that right now we are at a disadvantage and they have a completely different set of interests from us. So we have to worry about ours. And there's nothing constructive from trying to convince them otherwise. Because they won't see it your way. Only very few white people see it our way. And those white people don't really have as much of an impact on the entire white community as blacks would have with their own community. So there's no point trying to change it. So based on everything I mentioned in this video, this is why I think we should avoid discussing race with them. It's not racism against whites. It's not hate. It's common sense. It's understanding that every group has their own bias. And blacks have their own bias too. I believe that's part of the problems we have. Sometimes we don't allow ourselves to see some of the issues that we should be worrying about. But likewise, they have their own biases. And there's no amount of talking and conversing and YouTubing, for that matter, that can really change that. So Based on the previous video and this one, these are the reasons I believe you should avoid trying to get them to see your point of view. Because they won't see it because they don't want to see it. They have no interest in seeing it. And they have no benefits from doing that. So that will be all. Till next time.